And Alex Nguyen is the Agricultural Inspector for Sonoma County Department of Agriculture Weights and Measures. And today he is going to do the second part of the hour for laws and regs, and presenting on a walk through a pesticide use monitoring inspection. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, thanks, Cindy. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me move this out of the way. But yeah, no, thanks, Cindy. Thanks, Travis. My presentation really picks right up from where Travis left off. A little bit about myself. I'm one of the agricultural inspectors here in Sonoma County. I recently joined the department. I got my degree in entomology at UC Davis in 2015, so I'm pretty glad to see different faculty and alumni pretty well represented as presenters, and I'm sure some of you in the audience here in the seminar. So that's it's really fun. Glad to see so many familiar names on today. So what I'm here to talk about is that it's really kind of our role in agriculture, the County Department of Agriculture's system here. I know that county agriculture departments have been brought up a few times in a couple presentations yesterday, and some of you may be more familiar with what we do pertaining with pesticide use, and some of you may be less familiar. So I kind of want to give it an overview of what we do and how we do it. Essentially, the county department, agriculture departments are the local regulatory agency tasked with enforcing all pesticide laws and regulations. This is mandated through the state food and agricultural code. A lot of this work includes follow-ups on pesticide use exposure incidences for all pesticides. This includes antimicrobial products as well, such as a lot of the household bleach and household cleaners you may have in your home right now. Believe it or not, they are considered a form of pesticide. The work includes conducting interviews with individuals, collecting pesticide samples, residue samples, tank mix samples on different surfaces, different products. So you'll see us out there speaking to growers, farmers, landscapers, structural fumigators, structural pest control companies, and even homeowners, depending on the situation. In addition to our interest in the pesticide application, pesticide use itself, we also ensure that folks with the potential to be exposed to pesticides, such as field workers, are safe and are aware of the different potential hazards of working near, in, and around treated fields. So you'll be able to see us around out during the growing seasons, speaking to a whole host of people, driving around. I'd like to focus on really the pesticide application inspection, which typically occurs when one of the inspectors like myself, encounters an ongoing pesticide application. Through our pesticide regulatory program, we incorporate routine surveillance. So again, you'll see us driving around, looking for different pesticide applications that happen within our counties. So what do we actually do when we're out in a field, pesticide application, right? We simply record what we see, take notes on the good and the bad of a particular application. Keep in mind, we aren't out to get you. We aren't out to get people or to find violations. We want folks to succeed, and we will make every effort to correct issues that are correctable that at the time of inspection. Some things we just need to remind folks about. We're really interested we're very much interested in the immediate safety of whoever the applicator is and the safety of the surrounding area. There is a chance if the conditions make an application a bit more hazardous, we may temporarily halt an application until a safety issue can be mitigated. Sometimes these issues are as simple as having an applicator put on a pair of gloves that he or she may have in the rig. But other things such as a high wind, we may stop it, ask the person to stop for that. An inspector may ask several clarifying questions, really to educate him or herself on the work that's taking place. This is especially true when a particular method of application or a particular product is seldomly encountered. Remember, folks out there that do pesticide applications and do manage large pesticide programs, remember that you are the professional pesticide applicator. We interpret laws and regulations and ensure kind of the overall. Just kind of quickly in the chat, if folks can respond to see. I want to kind of get an idea of how many folks out there have had interactions with county inspectors doing this sort of work before. You can just type in yes, I have back in a couple of years ago. I kind of just want to get a feel of how many folks. I think we have about 225 people online. I'm not sure kind of what the background there is. There we go. Hopefully these have been good interactions. Hopefully there's lots of handouts and paperwork be read and given afterwards. That's great. No, that's great. Glad to see my fellow inspector colleagues in these neighboring counties are out there talking to folks. You get to the next screen here. So some of the requirements we look for immediately address pesticide product labeling. We're going to be reiterating this over and over again. During an inspection, inspectors will expect to see that an applicator has access to the product label. Not only because it's regulation and law, but it also helps us do our work to figure out what is being used and how it's being used. The label doesn't need to be the physical copy, and I kind of want to emphasize that an applicator can pull up a label on his or her phone, an electronic version, if that is easier and if that is more convenient. The label that ultimately is attached to the product that you are using at that time is the enforceable label. So kind of be cautious at choosing an electronic label, because many times those are only specimen labels and don't reflect the actual label attached to the product. Electronic specimen labels can be more restrictive or can be less restrictive than what you are actually using there. So before you using electronic copies, double check with labels that you are using, the products that you are using. The label is the single best document to inform a pesticide handler on how to safely use the product. Reiterating what DPR, our DPR liaison, Gary, spoke about yesterday, it shouldn't be a surprise to many of you that this is a legal document. So one would be in violation of both federal and state law for any use that conflicts with a labeling statement. So an inspector like ourselves would ask to see a label. We look at different statements, like I've put here, that clearly talk about environmental hazards and clearly talk about any restrictions. We take a glance at the PPE requirements to make sure that the applicator has everything he or she needs to perform the application safely. So we'll do a quick label review. In addition to any use restrictions, we will take a look to see if the product is allowed to be applied on a specific commodity at all. The use of a pesticide on a crop that is not listed on a label would constitute a violation of pesticide product labeling. So double check all your labels. This is the perfect time of the year to, like Travis said, you kind of review different products, take a look at what you have, what you may not want to use anymore, to really familiarize yourself with the different products. Another important thing that inspectors look for that concerns PPE. Now in California, regulations break down the specific requirements for PPE beyond what may be required on the labeling. And I think this is a very important concept to understand. We call this regulation PPE, right? So the employer must provide both labeling required PPE and or this regulation PPE, whichever is more restrictive. At a minimum, California regulations typically require gloves to be made of a chemical resistant material and be at least 14 mils thick. Protective eyewear, glasses, goggles, face shields, need to be ANSI Z87.1 rated to provide the adequate wraparound kind of brow and temple protection. You can quickly check, and this is what we would check too as inspectors, the eye protection. You can quickly take a look at the temple, the bridge, or the temple parts of the particular eyewear, and ANSI Z87.1 or whatever safety standard that exceeds that would typically be printed on there. So during an inspection, we take a look at the gloves, ask an applicator or the supervisor out there kind of what type of material, what type of thicknesses of gloves you have. We'd hope to see, and we'd actually expect to see that PPE is in good functioning condition and provides and is adequate for this applicator. Another thing that we'll look for is how it's stored, how clean PPE is stored. Storage of PPE in an area where it potentially could get contaminated by pesticide mixes, pesticide concentrates is non-compliant with this regulation. Here on this slide, I like to emphasize that this slide kind of emphasizes that glove materials need to be resistant and compatible with pesticides used. Now the material really needs to be resistant to the solvents found in pesticide products. Many products, nitrile rubber seems to be adequate, but definitely check the label. Different formulations of the same product may not be compatible with just standard nitrile gloves. As you can see, labels that require specific chemical resistant gloves will encode the material that needs to be used. They may simply list a letter A through H. This is in accordance with federal guidelines. So this useful guide here will hopefully help you determine which gloves are appropriate to meet the label of whatever product you do decide to use. And take a quick look, a lot of different products may not be compatible with kind of the more familiar materials. So you reach out to us. If you're interested in a copy of this guide, I know DPR maintains a link where this guide is available online as a PDF. So you'll be more, they're free to take a look at that. We'll probably send you a link if you reach out to us about that. I want to show you two things that we as inspectors kind of frequently encounter in the field. On the left are what I like to call the rubberized cloth gloves, which are simply gardening gloves that you can pick up at any hardware store. And these gloves are unfortunately not considered chemical resistant. They actually may be worse for you. The cloth has a tendency to absorb materials and will just have prolonged contact, will result in prolonged contact with skin. So those gloves like that are not considered chemical resistant and not compliant with PPE regulations. On the right are these sunglasses that appear to wrap around a person's face. It looks like they provide a lot of protection and are actually in the same style as a lot of the ANSI Z87.1 protective eyewear products. But again, they were close enough to the bridge and the temple, and nowhere on the device itself states any form of protection. So take a look at your PPE and you have in your storage. Take a look at the different eye protection your applicators are wearing to make sure that they are adequate. A lot of the ANSI Z87 eyewear looks exactly like sunglasses, and they have tinted frames, tinted lenses too. So just take a look at that. And again, reach out to us, bring them into our offices. We'll be more than happy to take a look. In a production agriculture setting, inspector, we would look for adequate decontamination facilities. That's water, soap, single-use towels, spare coveralls. Water should be clean and safe to use. The inspection may include temporary running the tap. We'll open up the spigot real quick to make sure that it is clean, it is of a good temperature, adequate temperature, and a safe flow. Oftentimes, we may see these items kind of scattered around the field. An applicator may have soap, may have towels here, but the water or the spare coveralls may be back in the shop. So they really do need to be in one place where one can go and access and grab all of that. So take a look at that. For pesticides that require protective eyewear, employers must ensure that the applicator have access to 1 pint of water that's immediately available, or enough water to rinse their eyes at the mixed load site. A standard to measure how close eye wash is really to ask oneself, is it reasonable for an individual that is blinded by a pesticide to find and reach adequate emergency eye wash? So if you keep that question in mind, it essentially will help you guide kind of how together this requirement. Respiratory protection. This is always kind of a tricky one. Hopefully this chart breaks it down well enough. In situations where the label, permit conditions, regulation, or employer policy requires a respirator, the employer essentially needs to have a respiratory protection, written protection program to walk individuals through kind of how respirators are used and the safety of using respirators. Respirators inherently restrict airflow. So this is a hazard to wear different types of respirators. This is a hazard to an employee if he or she may not be aware they have a heart condition, lung condition, right? So in a voluntary setting, employers need to ensure that this hazard is communicated through the voluntary respirator use posting, if that is the route where employers are allowing voluntary use. Now, if the employer is providing the elastomeric, that's the rigid half-face respirators, then essentially all those items that are required in a respiratory protection program still take place. So reach out to us if you need a copy of this kind of flow chart to walk one through the program. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about that and inspect your respirators. I'd like to emphasize that the differences between the NP and R respirator cartridges and filters real quick. The N95 is very much a universal third respirator and is actually very adequate for most uses, but I want to talk about the P and R filters. So in mixes that incorporate an oil, usually an oil adjuvant or or the formulation has an oil in it, and the mix requires a respirator, the N95 won't actually be adequate. Filters that are P95s, P100s, R95s, R100s, those are actually the respirators that we would want to see if oil mixes are used. And in fact, on the product labeling for these respirators, you'll see the kind of use restrictions. So if respirators are involved, kind of familiarize yourself with the devices, familiarize yourself with different mixes that you may be using to see if they are compatible with each other. Pesticides handler safety training. All pesticide unlicensed, uncertified applicators must be trained on each pesticide used annually prior to the use. So we would want to see kind of how safely are applicators handling pesticides. How aware are your applicators of label requirements, labeling safety, and how knowledgeable they are in events such as spills, exposures, accidents. An inspector would ask a hypothetical applicator what they would do in certain events. If your applicators hold a license, hold a private applicator certificate, they are considered trained. They are considered trained because in maintaining those licenses, they get the regular laws and regs updates and the latest kind of safety regulations out there. So contact your ag department to see if they're able to provide a kind of a training template. If you are using a third-party trainer to match up training to make sure that whatever training your applicators are receiving are up to date with the latest changes and regulations. So that's really it. Just want to show this picture real quick, taking a step back, showing what the agriculture department here in Sonoma County have been involved with in the past few months. Here you see a picture of our latest plastic container recycling event where we collected 14,000 pounds of plastic containers. So we appreciate all those on this call right now that may have stopped by and said hi and recycled their plastic. Hopefully we'll see you all again this spring, and stay tuned for the dates and locations, but we're hoping to have another one of these events in early May 2022. So with that, contact us, please. We love to get questions about your pesticide application program, pesticide safety programs. We'd love to help you. Stay compliant with the latest laws and regulations. Yeah, we are very open to compliance inspections, where we'll go out there and assess how you conduct your training, how your applicators perform work in the field. So give us a call our main offices, send us an email. We'll love to see you out there. I think we have a couple questions for minutes.
Yes, thank you, Alex, for your presentation today.
Yeah.
Michelle's going to ask you some questions that came in the Q&A.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so the first question, so does the label need to be with the actual applicator during the application, or a central accessible place by everyone in the location?
So, so the applicator needs to be able to access it at the time that they're performing the application, and at the time that an inspector would be there. So we'd expect to see the label on at the same site, at the same location, general location. So if there's a mixed load site at the end of the field, right, and the applicator is at the other end, and I'm conducting the inspection with your applicator at the other end, I'd expect the applicator to know where the labels are at, kind of in that site. If we're crossing streets, if we're going to the main office, main warehouse to find a label, that's not going to be compliant with that regulation. That it defeats the purpose of having something available where the applicator has a question about what he or she is doing, we can just look it up real quick. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yes. The next question is, does a garden hose qualify as an available eye wash station?
Yes, depends on what water source that garden hose is hooked up to. Again, if it's clean water, there's adequate water to provide rinsing. I think the slide that I had up said about 15 minutes of clean running water. It does qualify as eye wash. Again, would you want to put your eye in there in the flow of the water if you got something in your eye with your applicator? Be fine. Those are important concepts to think about. We don't really care what hose, what type of hose the water is coming out of. As long as you're able to reach it when you're having issues, say in the middle of a 20-acre field, when you get pesticides in your eyes, I think that would meet the requirement.
So there are two people that want to know where the facility or the recycling center is located. I think it was from the last picture.
Yeah, I think we work pretty closely with some of our pesticide dealers out here in Sonoma to do that, to do these events. So that one was at the Wilbur Ellis facility, I believe. And, we're coordinating with another pesticide dealer right now to get that up and running. So yeah, stay tuned for a bit more details on that.
Okay, so we are out of time for questions, but there's still one more in the Q&A if you don't mind, Alex, answering directly by typing. So thank you so much for your presentation today. We're going to move on to our next presenter,